we've reached the second part. We're going to talk a bit about the challenges and the process. First, there are a lot of challenges when you're trying to work with LLMs and when you're trying to benchmark specifically. This is by no means a comprehensive list. Some of them, and I'll just read them out and explain them briefly. So resources, benchmarking on your own can be very, very costly. It can cost you a lot of time and money and energy, and getting it right is not always easy. It's not only time and money. There's an over-reliance on perplexity in most of the benchmarks, which sometimes doesn't accurately measure how well the model will perform or how well it will generalize. There's incredible variability, both in terms of the models. A lot of the foundational models do different things, were trained on different data sets, and therefore they perform differently in the wild, both because it was intentional and some unintentional behavior. And some models follow instructions better, and some models don't follow instructions. And secondly, they also vary over time. Anybody who's following any kind of social media which discusses AI, let's say Twitter, can very, very easily see that, there's a lot of bad rep about OpenAI technically maybe having switched the model in the background, and performance doesn't always remain the same. A lot of the benchmarking, or let's say intuitively speaking, the benchmarking which are based on human evaluations, you have this like inherent belief that those should be the best ones, and they're probably pretty good, but human labeling isn't perfect. Okay, we all know this. You put two doctors in front of a radiology screen, and they might not have the same answer, which is a problem. Leakage. There's a lot of data sets out there. A lot of them are in the internet, intentionally or unintentionally. Some model might have seen part of the data set when it was training, which would inadvertently make it better when it's being tested on the data set. Data is also a challenge. There's simply a limited reference of data. We all know that OpenAI used all of the internet, and it still had to employ all kind of smart methods, such as RLHF, to make the model better. There's limited data in the world. The internet is only yay big. A few other points. So one is degradation. There's a very cool paper from 2-3 weeks ago, I think, which showcases how fine-tuning can wreck a lot of the model properties. Specifically, I think the paper showcases that fine-tuning just a bit makes it suddenly very susceptible to all kinds of hacks and stuff like that, like Dan hacks, to anybody who's familiar. The last I'm going to mention here is the syntax. The models were trained in a very specific way. Every one of them had data processing done in a different way, had formatting in a different way. And when you're doing inference with these models care about how they were trained. At the end, they're generalizing on the trained data. I brought here just two examples of open source models. So the first one is Vicuna, and the second one is Falcon. I'm not going to go into the differences here, but you can see I'm basically asking the same question. I'm asking it to solve a quadratic equation, but the formatting ends up being very different. And if I'm not going to adhere to the formatting, I'm definitely not going to get the same performance. There are ways to getting around it. There are some tools such as Guidance, which standardize the format if you're going to be doing testing on your own. And I'll mention these tooling on one of the last slides. This is a very, very interesting read-up. It's on the Hugging Face blog. People saw some discrepancies in the MMLU. They started investigating, and then they were able to show that by changing very, very minute things, they were able to really skew the benchmark. So changing things like formatting or just adding a space in several places could create a difference of 5 to 7%. And there are even some papers showcasing like 22% difference. But even if you have a 5 to 7% change, it's, it's impactful. It's not something you can just say, oh, I don't care about. And also, you have to be very aware that when you're testing your use case, if you're not going to adhere to all of these things, to the formatting, you're missing out. You're not going to be getting potentially the actual results. All of this is to make the point of why each and every one of you, maybe not specifically, but the company that you're developing for, should have their own personal benchmark. Just to recap, there are two types. First of all, choosing which foundational model you're going to work with. Here's a free tip. I really think everybody should start out, checking GPT-4. In the past year, it's been one of the best performing models. If you have other constraints, such as, I don't know, you need an air gap system, that's something else. But as a benchmark, it's probably one of the easier ones to use, and definitely one of the more performant ones. Yes, it has other problems such as latency and cost and stuff like that, but not so much the topic right now. The second is LLM system evaluation, which is what you guys will be doing most of the time. So how do we choose the right model? You need to understand what you're trying to solve. Okay, you need to sit with whoever is the business function defining the objective. You need to be familiar with the benchmarks. I gave you, I think, a pretty good list, but there are many more. And you need to find the one that measures what is most close to what you're doing in your company. Definitely, a lot of the times, there's not going to be somebody who performed the exact same task that you're trying to do. Okay, because otherwise, you really need to think what added value your product is adding. But you need to find a benchmark which is close. You need to understand it. And then you need to see which models perform best and incorporate all of your constraints. If you need something that's open source, you should take open source. If you need a fast model, you should probably take a small model. If you need a model that is better at following instructions, model that is less chatty, so on and so forth. There can be a lot of different constraints. Second, you don't have to, but you're really welcome to test. So again, there's a link at the bottom right of the slide here for the ARC dataset that is used in the benchmark. You can download it in entirety. You can just take a couple of questions and test it out. This is the format of how the ARC dataset questions look. Again, there are 14 million scientific questions with 4 options to choose from. This is supposed to tell you how well a model reasons. It also begs the question, what exactly reasoning means. Is the model really good at reasoning because it can answer scientific questions? That's something for you to decide or read up on. The internet thinks that is indeed the case. I also kind of, this is the best thing we have right now. The second thing is you're welcome to test. You can take a couple of examples or comprehensive list of examples and test it out for yourself. If you were to test, this is a very rudimentary example of how that would look. So on the left, you have the question and the answer. Okay, both of them coming from the ARC dataset. You can see a question is, which technology was developed most recently? And I just gave a couple of examples. So like cell phone, fax, steam engine, airplane. And the second question is pertaining to, archaeology. The true answer is actually A, okay? The latest technology that was developed out of the options that I gave it is actually cellular technology. Then you'll be using a model. Let's say I used Falcon, and the actual predicted answers that it gave me based on the questions. First one, it got right. It said that A is the right answer, and that is indeed true. The second one, it didn't get right, okay? It guessed B when the actual answer was C. First of all, if you're testing, you need to, follow through and go figure out which answers, first of all, what is the percentage of precision or recall that you got? What are some of like the failed answers? Is there anything that is tying them together that you can solve? And a lot of times it will bring you to the fact that like maybe you need to change the model. Okay, so here's an example. I changed the model from Falcon to Zephyr, which was released by Mistral a couple of weeks ago, and suddenly got both answers right. You're never going to get to 100%. You're also really not looking to get to 100% because then you'll be overfitting. But this is just the process, okay? This is the initial process of you choosing the underlying model. And you should be minding these things. Great. Moving on to the second part, system evaluations. So system evaluations, as I said before, you'll be holding the model static and you'll be evaluating everything around it, okay? Whether it be the prompts that you're using, prompt templates, or whether it be other subsequent response to other systems or LLMs. Why is it important? This can really blow up, okay? Here's an example of 4 to 5 lines of code, which actually create 10 plus subsequent LLM calls. The systems can get really complex, and they will get complex over time. Obviously, right now in production, we're seeing rather basic things, but as a system, systems get more robust and we progress in time and people develop more things, it will become much more complicated. How do we test? This is, again, not an exhaustive list. There are many different testing strategies that you can employ. We're just going to split it up into 2 things. You can use human evaluators or you can automate it and use a model. There are obviously trade-offs. Humans are going to be slower and they're going to be much more expensive. Models are going to be cheaper and faster. And there are other metrics which I did not take into account. Obviously, with a model, you can be more complete. Okay, you can test many more use cases than with humans, especially if you're testing a very, very large data set. Some of the trade-offs that I did want to mention for using models, okay, because now I'm going to be showing you how to benchmark your LLM system using models. I think it's very powerful, very useful, and cheap. Okay, and not everybody has access to a lot of resources. Not everybody has access to human labelers, especially not if they're experts. So if we're doing automated testing using a model, some of the trade-offs are listed here. So good things, it's going to be cheaper, faster. You're going to be able to reach a higher granularity. Okay, you can ask much more specific things. You can cover a much wider set of examples. You're going to have access to things which I'm not discussing here, like token probabilities. These are things like some of the models, the way they ask the question is very basic. Okay, if again, I want to reference the same thing so you get the example. If I'm talking just about the arc, if we just use the question to say which of A, B, C, D has the highest probability of being the model's response, you get one answer. If you change that same question and you ask, what is the next predicted token with the highest probability? It might choose a completely different word, like cow. Maybe it thought cow is more likely than C, but since you narrowed it down to asking which of the following A, B, C, D has the highest probability, that is a whole complete different answer. One is right and the other one is not. Some of the bad things, models are going to be very prone to bad prompts, and any biases you might have in the model will probably carry into your evaluation.